Hi, everyone, and welcome to Vikings Now. Jim Rich here, along with Pierre, and your Minnesota Vikings are now a wild card team after getting drubbed by the Detroit Lions 31-9. And Sam Darnold did not have the greatest of days. His passer rating, 55.5, and that was pretty much the ball game. His inefficiency to get this team in the end zone when they had those 4 trips into the red zone in the first half and came up with just 2 field goals, that's where this game went pear-shaped.
I think in the first half, inside the 10-yard line, Sam Darnold was 1 of 8 for either 3 or 4 total yards. I mean, that's just, man, that is the type of inefficiency that we have not seen from Sam Darnold all season long. This team usually very good when you got goal to go, and they usually finish drives, but that was not the case today. And to be fair, I know that there was a lot of people, especially early in the game, yelling at Kevin O'Connell saying, just kick the field goal, take the points, and why do you have to go for it on 4th down? But normally I'm in that camp. That's the thing. Normally I'm in that camp, but in this game and in this context in particular, I was perfectly okay with Kevin O'Connell going for it on 4th down inside the 10-yard line because you need touchdowns to beat this Lions team. Field goals are not going to get it done against this type of offense, and the Lions offense didn't have their best day at all by any means, and they still put up 31 points. Yeah, by the end of the game, you and I were kind of talking about like, well, this game was, a little bit of a grinder game, and then suddenly by the end of it, you're like, how did they put up over 30? Jahmyr Gibbs was the reason they put up over 30. He had a monster night with 4 touchdowns, but I didn't have a problem with Kevin O'Connell going for it on 4th down. It's an execution thing. Execution was the key tonight, or lack of, I should say. And I think that's where the game was lost. It was just a lack of execution.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Early in the game, even though they could have got the 3 and they could have got within 1 point at one point,
or maybe taken a 2-point lead at one point too.
I don't have a problem with that because, one, you're leaving them with the ball at their 2-yard line, at their 3-yard line, or at the goal line. And the Vikings were able to take advantage of leaving the ball there when they got the turnover there that gave them great field position. But again, they could not finish. So if they were able to stick even 1 or 2 of those goal-to-goal situations, it would have been a completely different game because then it would have taken all the cards out of Detroit's hands, right? The offense was still all here because we have the lead. We could do whatever we want. They didn't force Goff to have to try to throw the ball to get Gibbs out of the equation. And because they weren't able to, that was the problem. And what Pete Bursitt said, if you're able to watch Vikings postgame tonight, or it's posted as well, he talked to us from Ford Field afterwards. He said, expect the Rams to copy exactly what the Lions did to them defensively because it worked, and it is a copycat league.
And they were +2 on the turnover margin tonight, too. Plus 2 interceptions of Jared Goff. And they still lost time of possession. They still lost by 22. I mean, this was the type of inefficient start from, I don't want to place it all on Sam Darnold, but this offense never really got it going. And then late in the second quarter, when they pulled themselves to within 1, then you see Will Reichard kick the ball out of bounds, and the Lions are down the field in 20 seconds and kick a field goal just before the end of the half. That's 3 points that really could end up being a difference in a playoff game. Those are the little subtle mistakes that are made that just cause you to lose football games. We hadn't seen it for much of the season. We saw it here today. It's the second time Minnesota has lost to Detroit this season. Detroit just, if they're not the best team in football, I know Kansas City is definitely going to be talked about given their record. But to me, Detroit is the best team in football despite the injuries on defense, and they lost another one tonight. Terrion Arnold left the game, and that's going to be a big blow to their secondary if he's not able to return for the postseason. But it's just unlucky that you have a 14-3 season, and arguably the best team in football is in your division. It's just one of those things that just so happen to happen this year.
Yeah, we have never seen this scenario ever in NFL history where 2 14-win teams met each other, and they happened to be in the exact same division. So because of that, the Vikings do not win the division. They drop to a wild card. They will now play the Los Angeles Rams next Monday night. So it's a Monday night game. The Vikings do get an extra day to try to figure that out. So that should negate the travel of flying back to the Twin Cities. They should be back late Sunday night, early Monday morning. and then they'll have that extra day in there. So they'll fly out to Los Angeles, but they'll probably do that Saturday or maybe even Sunday to get themselves ready for that Monday night game. So the travel shouldn't be that big of a problem. But the problem is you no longer have home field.
Yeah.
Something that the Vikings were very proud of. They were very good on their home field, and a lot of people expected this team to do it. My question is, how much damage was done to the Vikings psyche moving forward, right? Because you've been building this house all year, and look at this, we're 14-2, and Sam Darnold is the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. And then all of a sudden, it just gets obliterated in one night. So how much of a shelf life does that have, do you think, for this team? Or do you think they've built up enough internal fortitude, internal confidence that they can say, all right, that sucked, but let's get right back at it?
I don't see any reason why the Vikings shouldn't still be confident. I think this was just one of those games where it didn't work out in your favor. Again, the lack of execution that we saw from this team, that we hadn't seen from this team. If I'm Kevin O'Connell, at the end of the game, I said, hey, you know what? We're going to flush this game. But you know what else? We won 14 games this year. We won 14 games this year. There is no reason for us not to feel confident, even though we have to start the postseason on the road. We won 14 games this year. Why shouldn't we feel confident? It wasn't our night in Detroit. But I still think that there's plenty of reason for the Vikings to feel confident, even though they are going to the only other team that beat them this year in the LA Rams, which should be an interesting chess match between Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay.
Yeah, and also Justin Jefferson, you can see those comments on our website. He spoke about the game, and he brushed it off completely.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, he said that basically, hey, it was a regular season game. This wasn't the playoffs. It doesn't end our season. It doesn't stop us from winning the Super Bowl. And I think that's the attitude that everybody has to take. I bet he got that from O'Connell's post-game speech. Mm-hmm. They don't post them after losses, but I am thinking that that's the road he took. And for Justin to come out and say that, I think that's a huge statement that your best player is thinking that, you know what, it's fine. We're going to move on. And we're in good shape still.
It is unfortunate that you do create a tougher pathway to the Super Bowl for yourself after this loss, because in all likelihood, if you're going to make a run to the Super Bowl, it's all going to have to be on the road. You're really going to have things break right for you in the wild card round to have the opportunity to possibly host a second round game, a divisional round game. If Green Bay and Washington both win and Minnesota wins as well, then Minnesota will get to host Washington in the second round. But you need everything to break right for you. We'll see how everything goes in the wild card round. But again, Jimmy, listen, this team has been steady all year long. Even in their loss against the Lions, I mean, that was a competitive game.
Right,
back
they
and
had
forth
a chance
game.
right at the end.
Yeah, chance to win. The fourth quarter, second half got away from them in LA. This game was really the only bad loss they had. I just shouldn't say it's the only bad game. The Jacksonville game was a bad game. They were still able to win that game. But I'm not feeling rattled. I didn't love the result. Sam Darnold, we said this last week, even though he had a great game against Green Bay, there were a number of throws that he just airmailed or sailed over his receivers' heads. We saw that a few times last week, and we saw it again today. So I don't know what he and Josh McCown need to do in terms of looking at film and trying to figure out the mechanics of why he's starting to airmail some of these throws, because he's got to get that under control before they go to the Rams next week.
Yeah, and Kevin O'Connell in his post-game comments, as expected, backed Darnold and said, you know, we'll figure this out. They're going to look at the tape, try to figure out if it's mechanics or if it's confidence. That was one thing that Pete Persich brought up when we talked to him on Vikings postgame tonight. He said that it didn't look like Sam had the confidence to throw the ball in tight places. And Pete Najarian, who is on our show as well, he spoke about the fact of how the Lions went after the Vikings wide receivers, the tight ends. You saw it on the television. There were hands all over the receivers, man-to-man defense, man-to-man hand fighting almost to get off that line of scrimmage. They wanted to disrupt those routes early so they couldn't get into that deep secondary and start running free.
Yeah, that's absolutely what happened all night long. I thought, the Lions got away with a couple, I thought. But, they were also flagged for a couple as well, but I thought they did get away with a couple. But, yeah, they were aggressive at the line of scrimmage, weren't they? I mean, they really just made things awfully, awfully difficult for Jordan Addison, for Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison's dad, by the way, welcome back to the show. Jordan Addison's father, who's popped off on Twitter or X yet one more time. But, it was really – that's I think the frustrating part about this game in particular, too, is that Detroit was coming into this game – they've come into the last month with injury after injury after injury on the defensive side of the ball. And that's something that you were hoping to take advantage of. But Aaron Glenn today, I mean, we talk about Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, with him being the hot new candidate and potentially the number one candidate for everybody looking for a new head coach. I thought Aaron Glenn defensively, as the Lions defensive coordinator today, had a sensational day today. So kudos to him as well. I thought the Lions just put together a really, really good game plan. We talked about it in the pregame show. You asked me who I thought was going to win. I did say I thought the Lions would win the game. Thought it was going to be a lot closer of a game.
Right.
But just 262 yards of total offense today for the Vikings. And again, I'm going back to what has happened in this run game.
Yeah, you brought it up last week after everybody was patting the Vikings on the back, and we all were. Why not? They did what they had to do against Green Bay, and I looked at it as that was the hardest game left for the Vikings.
Yeah.
That this Lions game, just because of the decimation of their defense, would have been an opportunity for the Vikings offense to really light up the scoreboard, but they were not able to do that. But you looked at the running game for the Minnesota Vikings, and Aaron Jones, who left last game with a quad injury, fought through it again today, missed a couple of snaps today with some more physical issues.
Came out of the locker room late at halftime. Yeah, he wasn't on the field to start the third quarter.
Yeah. And he's not that kind of back. He's not a Saquon Barkley kind of guy that you could give the ball 25, 35 times to. And Pete Najarian and you were discussing this off camera about that all of a sudden the NFL is about running backs again. After a couple of years, you remember Dalvin Cook couldn't get a dime from anybody.
Yeah, right.
Because everybody goes, oh, no, we're just going pass for first downs. Now, all of a sudden, offense have found out that they need a running game to burn clock.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Saquon Barkley, putting up an MVP caliber season. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, even when David Montgomery was healthy for the Lions, that's a crazy 1-2 punch as well. James Cook, I think, has had a phenomenal year in Buffalo as well. So this is absolutely, if Christian McCaffrey was healthy, when he's healthy, we all know what type of back he could be. I feel like this has been a renaissance year for the running back position, kudos to them, because they were almost an afterthought 2 years ago. And now we see how much of a focal point these guys can really be. And again, it highlights to me, and don't misunderstand me, Aaron Jones has been nothing short of fantastic this season for the Minnesota Vikings. But when you go back and watch the film on this game, the Vikings had first and goal from the 5 in the first quarter. They handed off to Cam Akers, who only gains 2. Then they go pass, pass, pass. Then they're inside the 10 again, and they passed on 4 consecutive downs. That is a problem to me, that you don't have a guy that you can turn around and hand the ball off to in short yardage situation that can plow you in from 3 or 4 yards out. That's a problem. It is a problem. And I think that was highlighted today, especially in the first half, how you're inside the goal-to-go situation, and you don't really have the confidence to turn around and hand it off to a running back to try to get you a 3 or 4 yard touchdown run. You don't have it. That's kind of what we were talking about last week.
Is it the backs or is it the offensive line?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the interior of the offensive line, it leaves a little bit to be desired at times, but I don't think it's entirely their fault. I don't think you have the type of physical back that can get between the tackles. They like to use Aaron Jones a lot in the passing game as well, which can mimic a running game. There's no shame in that. But in terms of really pounding the football and making the linebackers feel you out there, there's no running back on this team right now that has that type of trait.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so the Vikings fall 31-9. The Rams beat the Vikings earlier this year.
Right.
The Lions just put out a tape that the Rams are drooling over of how they were able to disrupt this Vikings offense. Do you think the Rams have the pieces to be as disruptive defensively for this Vikings offense? Or do you think it was more the Vikings shooting themselves in the foot with the missed passes, with the not being able to capitalize on short fields?
Yeah, and let's not forget,
because this offense has been one of the best in the National Football League all year.
Yeah.
So you know, we focus on this one game and we're like, oh my goodness, this is just awful. But you have to realize there's that whole body of work they put together. Whereas you said, this team's won 14 games, and we're talking about a team that backed into a playoff spot.
Yeah, and you remember how that game started out? It was a Thursday night game. That game started out like a house of fire. It was 14-14, I think, before the end of the first quarter.
First time in the NFL where two teams took the ball and scored on both opening possessions. So it was 4 straight possessions, and it was 14-14.
If memory serves me right, I think the final score was 30-20, if I'm not mistaken. So things went quiet for the Vikings in the second half. Let's not forget, that was the game where Christian Darrisaw was lost for the season. That play right before the end of the first half. So I think this is – I do think that defensively – the Rams, they've got great young talent, don't they, with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk? I mean, those guys really up front do great. They lost Aaron Darnold last season. Everybody's wondering, oh, man, how are they going to try to replace a guy like him, a Hall of Famer in Aaron Donald? But defensively, especially up front, I think the Rams are pretty stout. And again, sorry to be cliche, I think this is going to be another game that's going to be won and lost in the trenches. The Rams have a dynamic running back in Kyren Williams, not as physical as a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, but a guy who's had a Pro Bowl caliber season. So, and of course, you got to talk about the wideouts with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, and they got a good third wide receiver in Tutu Atwell as well. You know, they just got Tyler Higbee back at tight end. So there's weapons all over the field for this team. This is not going to be an easy game. I'm curious to see what the line is going to be when it comes out, to see who's going to be favored in this matchup. But two coaching staffs that know each other inside and out, too.
That's a dangerous thing, I think, too, because as much as O'Connell is thinking and trying to outsmart McVay, McVay is the guy that taught him the ropes of how an offense works. So everything that McVay has said, he knows pretty much what's in O'Connell's head. Yes, they've been away now from 3 years, and I'm sure Kevin has his own thoughts now, and it's not like completely following a McVay playbook. But McVay, I think, still feels he has the upper hand on O'Connell, just because it's a guy that came up under you, and, you know, you feel like that. Like I feel I have the upper hand on Pierre once in a while, and then he schools me. So
yeah, I'm
sure that happens a lot. Way.
No, the one thing too that's interesting to me in terms of the coaching matchup as well is, let's not forget that Brian Flores wasn't the defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots when they won the Super Bowl against the Rams a handful of years ago, but he was the defensive play caller in that game, and he shut that Rams offense down. It was a 13-3 game that the Patriots were able to win the Super Bowl. And obviously that was a handful of years ago. I understand that. And the Rams dropped 30 on the Vikings on Thursday Night Football earlier in the season. But, you know, Brian Flores sees this Sean McVay type of offense every single day in practice. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's going to be much that Brian Flores and this defensive staff is going to be surprised by when they study the Rams on film and how they go about trying to slow down this Rams offense. I think the one thing that is uber important for the Vikings in this game is to get pressure on Matthew Stafford, because he's not a very mobile quarterback. If you can get pressure in a hurry, that, again, the trench play is what you got to pay attention to. Whoever wins at the line of scrimmage is most likely going to win the game. So that's where I'm going to be paying attention to in this game.
Yeah, and you look at what the Viking defense did tonight. They were fabulous in the first half.
Yeah, they really were.
They did enough for this team that they should have won. So I don't think the defense is going to be as spun up as the offense is going to be in their meetings this week, because they got the 2 turnovers. They got the Rams on a couple of 4th downs where they were able to stop them. And so I think the defense will be fine against the Rams. But you look at what this offense has to do, and you can't give teams second opportunities.
Right.
You're now in the playoffs. the Vikings have been in the playoffs basically since the Green Bay game because you needed to win that to have a shot at all the marbles like you did tonight where you had a chance at the number 1 seed. You don't get that, but you still, fortunately, have another life. But now there is no more, well, we can come back next week because if you don't get it done, your season is over.
Yeah, and let's not get too far ahead of ourselves now. We'll have that conversation when we need to have that conversation, but when you look at this matchup in particular with the Rams, again, the secondary of the Minnesota Vikings make me a tad nervous. I don't think, obviously tonight, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams were held relatively in check. I mean, the chunk plays were there at times, but nothing back-breaking from what we saw from those 2 wide receivers tonight, which I thought was going to be the Achilles heel of the Vikings going into this game. It didn't turn out to be that scenario. Jahmyr Gibbs was the one who ran all over the Vikings tonight, 139 yards, 4 touchdowns in the game. That was really where they got up front. But it felt like a dam that was slowly leaking and then eventually broke. But I'm not trying to harbor too much on the Vikings defense from this game because the offense didn't really give them much of a chance.
Right.
Like they too many 3-and-outs, too many mistakes on offense. I thought the defense, I think you're right. I think the defense played their hearts out today. It just, it was a situation where they just couldn't hang on.
All right, we want to hear from you commenters. Are you still confident this Vikings team can make the run to the Super Bowl? We read your comments, and yes, you could rip us, but please, we're all here just to have fun, right? Sports is a diversion. Enjoy this run and enjoy this. But here, we'll leave you with something to spin you all up. Jay Glazer on the NFL on Fox pregame show today was doing a segment on coaches and the carousel of them moving around the league. And one of the coaches, he said, is going to be a surprise candidate or could be a surprise candidate available to other teams is none other than Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, that was something today, wasn't it?
Now, we know Jay's been in the business long enough where he just doesn't make stuff up to get his name out there.
No, he's as plugged in as anybody.
There is some, I don't even want to call it smoke. I'd say maybe a smoldering. Mm-hmm. But what he said is that teams have called or will call the Minnesota Vikings and say they want to trade for Kevin O'Connell. He still has 1 year left on his contract. O'Connell and Kwesi, we asked the Wilfs at the start of last season. Most people don't let coaches and GMs get to the end of their deal before they get another extension. And Mark Wilf was quoted as saying, we'll watch. We'll see how it goes. We'll talk about it after the year. Well, we're close to the end of the year. Hopefully it's not next Monday night. But what do you think? Does this have any credibility to you that Glazer is saying that other teams are going to knock on the Vikings' door and ask the Wilfs to, why don't you trade us that guy? We'll give you number 1. You guys only have 3 or 4 picks next season.
That's right.
We can reload your closet for you.
Well, I definitely don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that teams are going to call and maybe inquire and try to pry Kevin O'Connell out of Minnesota. That's not the part that's inconceivable to me. The part that's inconceivable to me is the Wilf family willingly trading him or willingly let him go into the final year of his contract without an extension and not expect an extreme blowback from this fan base, because if Kevin O'Connell walks out the door after becoming the first coach in franchise history to win 13 games, at least 13 games in a season twice in his first 3 years, you are going to have some explaining to do to this fan base, and they're going to be out with the pitchforks in front of your stadium because and I don't think the Wilfs want that kind of smoke. I really don't. I don't think they want anything to do with that. I think they will figure something out in the offseason. But again, I've said this before. I don't have a problem with the Wilfs approach in terms of we'll see how you do this year, then we'll talk about your contract after the year. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
It's not today. Today you reward people before they do something.
Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I know. I'm the old school guy. I'm the one that says, you put it on the table and we'll be happy to pay for it.
Sure.
But nowadays, how about all these people that say they're disrespected? Like if you're covered with a linebacker.
Yeah.
I heard, I think it was Aaron Jones said that he was disrespected when they covered him with a linebacker. I'd be like, yahoo, let's go, baby, because I know I'm going to rip this guy apart. Ed Jones does when he gets a linebacker.
Yeah.
But disrespect is like the last thing. I'd go, you're a fool.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be disrespected. But that's the way a lot of people think. And maybe this is coming from O'Connell's camp, telling Glazer that says, hey, my guy should have been paid last year. Look what he's done now. And now they're going to come around with the Briggs truck. I'm sorry, but you're late with that truck. We may want to check out somewhere else.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if, like you were saying, to that point, if I was Kevin O'Connell and the Wilf family didn't want to give me a contract extension heading into the final year of my deal, if it was me, if I was in his shoes, I would say, whatever, okay. I mean, if you don't want to resign me, somebody else is going to want me.
Right.
No doubt about it. So I'm going to be fine one way or the other. So I'm going to be a coach and a head coach, at bare minimum, at worst, an offensive coordinator, a highly paid offensive coordinator in this league. But I think after what we've seen in the first 3 years here in Minnesota, I don't think Kevin O'Connell is going to be anything but a head coach moving forward if his tenure in Minnesota is over, to which I don't think it will be. For me, there's nothing to lose here for Kevin O'Connell. If he's not going to be a head coach in Minnesota, he's going to be a head coach somewhere else in the National Football League. He's going to be well paid. He's going to be well taken care of. If he wants to stay in Minnesota, which I would imagine he does want to stay and continue his career here, but he's going to be just fine. The Wilfs are the ones that have more to lose here than Kevin O'Connell.
Absolutely. All right, we want to hear your comments. Would you trade away Kevin O'Connell for
and what do you want for him? Yeah,
well,
what do you want?
It's got to be multiple first-round picks.
What did Gruden get? Didn't Gruden get 2 first-round picks from the Raiders way back in the day?
I think so.
It was
then
2.
you got Belichick being traded by the Jets, and I don't know what that haul was. You guys could Google that. Let us know. But, I mean, it sounds so crazy. But for Jay Glazer, who is a guy that we both respect, he has a lot of sources in the National Football League. He didn't just come in on Sunday morning and tell the producers, hey, you know what? I don't really have much this week. So I think I'm just going to make something up and throw this out there that Kevin O'Connell, that'll be a real, hook for my segment. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
So it's not just him making things up.
Right.
As Paul Allen.
Yeah, it's not his style.
He took a shot at him, said, you're way off. We're LOLing here in the team hotel. He put it on Twitter. You can look at it. I don't know if you LOL it right away. The Wilfs, as you said, can make it all go away with a big check at the end of this season.
Yeah, and I imagine that they will, and that's something, of course, we'll revisit at the end of the season. I'm sure it'll get rectified.
It'll be a great Vikings Now podcast.
Oh, wouldn't that be something if Kevin O'Connell gets traded? That would just be, oh man, I can't imagine what would happen and what the fan reaction to that would be. But first things first. Let's try to see what the Vikings do against the Rams and see if they can take one step closer to reaching the Super Bowl this year.
All right, that'll do it for us. And stay with Fox 9 all week long. We have specials every night of the week at 6:30. Half hour. Bursich will join us. Ron Johnson will join us. He'll be involved. Ahmad, Don, everybody will be around here. We'll have plenty of sound from the Vikings as well as they get prepared to open the postseason at the LA Grams on Monday Night Football. That'll do it for us. Pierre, thanks for staying, and we will talk to you next time.